Om Sahanavavatu Sahano Punuktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astumavidishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may that one protect us both together. May that one nourish us both together. May we work together with great energy. And may our study also be vigorous and effective. May we not unnecessarily cavil or argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is the Vedanta Series question and answer, which gives us an opportunity to explore some of the philosophical and practical difficulties that you may have with this subject of Vedanta. So I think there are a few questions. Well, first question was already asked. What is a good question? I'll deal with that now. So you may have a second question.
Okay. So this question is in relation to a passage from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So where he's telling a parable from Ramayana, and by the side of the river where they used to go and take bath, and Ram used to keep his bow somewhere on the ground. And there used to be a frog who used to come and offer pranam. And one day he was missing, or one day after taking bath, he found when he was taking it out, a little bit of blood was seen at the bottom of his bow. And he asked Lakshman to investigate what has happened. And he found a very dying frog lying quietly, and he had been hurt by Ram's bow. So very compassionately, Ram asked that, why did you not call out for help? And then the frog replied that when other people hurt me and I am in trouble, I said that, Ram, please save me. But when I see Ram has hurt me, I just keep quiet. So how do we know that which one is Ram's bow and which one is not?
Okay, so there are a number of different answers to every question. And the Advaitic answer will be that all bows belong to Ram. And that means...
Yeah, and I would like to also know different, that was my guess, what you just said. And you said that there could be different answers, and I'm really interested to see the other perspectives as well.
So all answers will come into different perceptions of how we view the world, and that will always be relative. So no matter about the Advaitic philosophy, there is always a necessity to shift our position in terms of where are we personally standing now. So we can look out at the world and see a material world full of beings. We can see it as chemicals. That's one view. In which case, when the bow has been placed on the frog, we could do it intentionally or unintentionally, of course. We also have to understand that many different things happen. This is why we say Om Shanti 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 3 times, because we acknowledge such things as what insurance agency calls act of God. Something just happens accidentally. I remember as a boy, we had a culture where we were all given, even at the age, by the age of even 9 or 10, air rifles. And we would indiscriminately, unfortunately, shoot frogs, thinking that they had no worth in it. So if you hold a materialist point of view, you won't see any worth in life itself. The question of what is life is the irrelevancy. But the mystery remains. How do you get from a stone or rock to life? Sorry, Laura, will you just mute your mic? And I should state that, thank you. I should state that this is interactive, in which case, at any moment, you're free to interrupt me, all right? which means you can unmute your mic at that point and interrupt at any point. It's fine. This is a dialogue. It's not a talk, or I hope it's not going to be a talk. So there are many views, and these views are understood by the most profound teachers in the highest Advaita philosophy, including Shankaracharya. And there are many misunderstandings about Shankaracharya himself. And I raise the point of Shankaracharya because tomorrow is actually his birthday. And so with that in mind, I had that in mind today in terms of answering it from Shankaracharya's point of view, or any question from Shankaracharya's point of view. And there are many misunderstandings regarding his view. I think there are three main misunderstandings that are tied in with this question. And the first of it is that Shankaracharya discouraged any relationship with life or any duties. Is it our duty to protect? We might say Rama is the embodiment of Dharma, and his duty is protection. But there's a limit to it, because apart from anything else, we can never protect anybody or anything or any being from the sequence of birth, life, and death. If we consciously do any act of cruelty, and consciously means that there's an unconscious origin of it. In other words, there's a habit level that often displays unthinking behavior, then obviously we have to reform this habit level. And part of the habit is to see this universe in a material way. Just a bunch of chemicals thrown together with no answer, how does this abiogenesis occur? And so we may find that that doesn't produce much satisfaction for us. It doesn't provide us with a real answer. And I'm tying this in as well with the original question, what's a good question? A good question is a question that arises when we reach the border of an inquiry. So if you're a materialist, you'll reach a border of your inquiry and you'll see, are there any other avenues to go? And all of this is in the midst of our greatest teacher. Our greatest teacher is pain. Because as we proceed through life, we will develop various formulas and accept things, take things for granted, but will it reduce or eliminate pain? So the whole of the philosophy really is in a way centered around pain. And the most difficult pain to confront is what we're confronting as we speak. There are throughout the whole world wars ravaging. Throughout the whole world, there is the COVID virus, and many people will have lost, is the expression, loved ones. So we cannot avoid this whole idea of discomfort, pain, and we try to keep a light and positive attitude. But when we examine it properly, we'll have to agree with the Buddha in that all of us are experiencing pain. Pain is a reality to us. That's on the one side. And pain is caused by something. And that something would be various cravings and desires. In other words, it can vary between some expected result as a desire to a passionate obsession. That whole range is there. And when that doesn't get fulfilled, we feel pain. Of course, there's physical pain as well. And physical pain is because of an attachment. So these two coordinates, desire and attachment, go together to produce an uncomfortable universe for us. But it also provides us with an inquiry, a series of questions. Now we can go beyond the borders of the questions to do with the material universe. But that gives us a sticking point as well. We can go into an inner realm of psychology. We can try to explore some of the boundaries, some of the hinterlands of the mind itself. And that inquiry is called psychology. And we can come up with an idealistic philosophy about it. Idealism, the one possession of many, many philosophers, including Plato, including the German philosopher Kant. And so that's in contradistinction to a materialist question and a materialist solution. Now let's look at the frog's point of view. From the frog's point of view, the frog wants to be close to what the frog deems instantaneously to be an ideal. But the ideal then, when that obsesses the mind, and the example of the frog, by the way, is a very interesting example because I often give an example of the frog scientist with its limitations. And so when we look at things from our limited point of view, with full faith and love, then we are happy to accept all these so-called vicissitudes of life, accepting them for what they are, and we come to a conclusion. The conclusion really is that no matter what happens in life, if we are faithful in love, we are also accepting it. That's the frog's position. What is our position? More than likely not that of a frog. More than that, it's probably a complaining thing. And we could be a frog of a different type and say, oh, how cruel our God is to do this to me. And blame everything on God. I remember all the great difficulties in life. Well, we don't have to go into the past very much. We can take our imminent position with COVID virus. And there are some people who take a theological position of blaming. And maybe a shaky doubt in their faith. God is fine when things are going fine. When things are not going fine, then God is something like more like a demon. And if God is a demon, there's no God at all. So that's some people's position. But it's because they have a wrong rendering of what God is. So one misunderstanding about Sri Shankaracharya is he encourages, because of the non-dualistic philosophy, he says, please abandon everything. Every duty, please abandon. But bear in mind, Shankaracharya was something of a genius. And at a very early age, he would have already written commentaries. Commentaries, he would have learned by heart the Vedas. By the age of 10, we are told, he would already have mastered that. And he would have written comprehensive commentaries already on the Upanishads, on the Bhagavad Gita, at a very early age, and on the Brahma Sutras, these three key texts of our Vedanta philosophy. So Shankaracharya taught the physician and reviver of the eternal religion, Sanatana Dharma, principally by making these commentaries, but also by engaging in discussions at a time where the whole of religious pursuit, religious endeavor, religious inquiry, religious practice required a reformation. And whenever these great, great waves, as Swami Vivekananda would put it, come along, they're there with a reforming attitude. And that reformation lasts, that renaissance lasts for thousands of years, even to this present day. Assuming that Shankaracharya lived in the 7th or 8th century of this current era, maybe 686 or something like that, or maybe a little later. Scholars are not quite concluded on this. But let's say, for convenience sake, we accept the vast majority opinion and say the 8th century. It creates a great misunderstanding. So duty, no, he doesn't say abandon your duty. He understands that everybody has to start from a certain position. And not only that, but out of great compassion, as all teachers must, to take you step by step from where you are now. So that means there is no standard answer to any question, only a counter question before an answer is given. Please tell me, where are you standing now? Are you making your inquiry from a materialist point of view? That is centered around locally the human physical body. Do I now identify myself, the physical individuality, and have an understanding that everything is physical, in which case I will have no compassion whatsoever, theoretically anyway, no feeling for anything that is made from matter. And that includes frogs. But it doesn't really conclude the inquiry, because paradoxically, I don't apply the same values to myself. If I think that I am just a physical body made from chemicals, and that the mind and thought is just an epiphenomena of the brain, then why is it that I cling to life so badly? You see the paradox. So, secondly, maybe, dealing with the first one in brief, that work is performed in a certain spirit, purifies the heart, is Shankaracharya's position. And it is only really through this purification that we get the knowledge, which is the counterpoint to ignorance, and karma, action, is a way. And the second difficulty or misunderstanding, especially in Western countries, who've taken up this idea of non-dualism, is that this non-dualistic ideal of Brahman, that one without a second, is an enemy of the various deities, various worship practices. Clearly, that's not the case for Shankaracharya, because he writes the most beautiful hymns to the deities. Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, all get attention from Shankaracharya. And it was Shankaracharya that actually revives or brings about this emphasis of Shakti worship. So, but in all his hymns, he does emphasize this oneness. He says that behind all of this, there is this Satchit Ananda. So from this point of view, is a point of view of compassion, and we see the frog's attitude toward Rama is one of worship, and Rama is not condemning it. From Rama's point of view, though, we are assuming that Rama is fully immersed in a non-dualistic attitude in the midst of doing all the duty. And then you see from this point of view, there is no difference between Rama and the frog. That's a shift of position. A shift of position that says we can have a convenience attitude on the one hand, which takes things in the relative reality as something that we have to deal with, and that we can use it as a means to get to a highest conclusion of oneness. So in between, we have to deal with all of these things, and we don't leave off our common sense attitude, as I may have said last week. If you say, all of this is just like a dream, all of this is just oneness, is just Brahman, and the two being two sides of the same coin, it doesn't help us when we ask a carpenter, please will you make a table? These are the dimensions. So we have to learn to shift our attitude and come up with appropriate answers. That means solutions to very real problems. And these are, when we say real problems and real questions, what we are doing is we're saying these questions are to do with the nature of reality. These are the worthwhile questions. So this necessary method that all of us have to adopt in our own way, namely the method of viveka, discernment, vairagya, detachment. These philosophical points of view have to be put within the practical context of practice, and for most people, they require a personal God, and that is why in all of the mats established by Shankaracharya, worship goes on till midday. So there's no denying of this. Shiva, Vishnu, the Divine Mother, all of these get hymns from Shankaracharya in the most beautiful, most feeling language, making Shankaracharya unique, a poet, a songwriter, a devotee, a philosopher, all in one, an intellectual, all in one. So even in those theistic hymns, Shankara doesn't forget us, though, doesn't forget this one principle that Brahman alone is the foundation of all of these expressions and manifestations. And then the third misunderstanding, I think, to do with Shankaracharya, and that also comes from many Western critics, would be that he has moved away from the non-dualistic ideal of the Upanishads. And I come across this on many occasions. There are people who declare themselves to be Vedantins, and by that they mean Advaitins. And in modern times, we have contemporary authors along those lines who write such beautiful phrases as power of now. And then when you look at the practical implication of it, practicing this power of now becomes a very difficult thing to do. So sometimes they will say Shankaracharya's philosophy is actually pessimistic, and he's forgotten the optimism contained also in the Upanishads. But this charge, of course, is also without foundation. Just when we read the texts that Shankaracharya writes, Atma Bhuta, for example, is a positive title straight away. So I think it's Shankaracharya's everlasting glory that he points out through unimpeachable reasoning the spiritual nature of the world and the individual soul, the assertion of the divinity of the world. Now, these present us with a number of different positions. I've pointed out a materialistic position. I've pointed out a position that can be adopted by Rama and can be adopted separately by the frog. And I've pointed out an idealistic position that maybe pain can be dealt with on an idealistic basis. And then finally, there is the divinization of everything, seeing God in all beings and all beings in the self. This personalization comes in the Bhagavad Gita. Up to now, all the Upanishads will state, many of them, see the self in all beings and all beings in the self, and relating it to the grief that comes from pain. And Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita puts it in a different way. He who sees me in all beings. In other words, we can use the full capacity of the heart to see God in all beings and all beings in God. Dealing with the ego, as I said yesterday, in two different ways. And the ego, that is this sense of individuation, identity with the human body and mind. A kind of object, a subject identified with an object is our trap. How to separate this? So now, supposing the frog is fully egoistic. I am a frog. I thought you would protect me. Supposing that was the position of frog, the dial would have gone in a different direction. But now the frog is saying, oh, I am yours, you are mine. What a wonderful thing. I had to die at some point. But now what a blessing. You yourself have brought this on me. Is death a blessing to us? Most people don't take it like that. Only because for the dying person, they will take it like that. We are told by bereavement counselors who have a great deal of expertise in this area, and I mention in particular a series of books by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross They're a great, great expert on the phenomena of death and dying. And as a result, on bereavement counseling. Will maintain that from her, so many examples of death and dying that she gives in her profound and copious experience, nobody dies until they're actually ready for it. And once they get that acceptance mode, they go off peacefully, because their whole death experience is not a misfortune for them. They don't see it in this way. But those around them see it in that way because of their identification with the body and their attachment, therefore, to the physical person. The physical person, no doubt, with an accompanying character. But the whole combination is seen to be a loss. That's why we have the expression, we lost somebody. But who said they were lost? We don't think really in philosophical terms when those things impact on us personally. When they impact on us personally, we change our position. But prior to that, we had a great philosophy. Oh, everyone is born, everyone lives, everybody dies. It's an inevitable thing. But when it happens to us and around us, we shift our position and become as deluded as anybody else and start weeping. So here is a philosophical frog, full of acceptance. And the driving force for the acceptance is love. You did this, and I'm happy about it. You gave me, in some way, a happy release. Actually, in the Ramayana, we find Ravana having the same kinds of position. We find Marichi having the position. Oh, your arrow shot me. Well, if it had been any other person's arrow, it would have been a tragedy. But since it came from you, it's a registration, therefore, that any event in life, if we take it to its highest conclusion, since there is a oneness only, all events will come from that. And see another example given of a monk that was beaten, and his brother monks bring him back. See Ramakrishna's example. Who was it that beat you? And this jnani will tell us, oh, the one who is nursing me and the one who gave me the blows is the same person. It is that one without a second. What's the realization of it? Do we naturally have this realization? No. Do we have to do something to get it? Yes. And Shankaracharya, coming back to that, provides us with a two-pronged approach. One is an effect of the other. Please be sure that we understand what is the nature of reality, what is the truth. That does not mean to say we have to leave off our devotion. No, our devotion is a means. You won't get this realization through meditation, nor will you get it through good works, nor will you get it through any other means, prayer, love of God. You won't get this realization from this. You'll get the preparation for it. You will be preparing the ground for it. You'll be refining the mind so that this revelation occurs by itself, spontaneously, since that was always your nature, since the Atman and the Brahman are only one thing. So there are three approaches, even philosophical approaches, in the answer to the question. And the one approach may say, that God and I are separate. I'm happy that we are separate. And I want to cultivate love of God. I don't want to become the sugar. Don't want to be the sugar. I want to taste the sugar. But having tasted it, there's a saturation point. And ultimately, inevitably, this bhakti yields jnana, yields a sense of oneness, where nearness becomes oneness. Just like when you take a nail or some steel object, iron object, I should say, and bring it close to a magnet, you can start feeling the pull of it. And if you continue that, bringing it closer, then the pull becomes irresistibly an attractive force, and essentially the iron and the magnet, in a sense, become one. And then the other philosophical position, which says that a portion of myself, see 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, know that a portion of myself has become the jiva in the world of jivas. And know that I have become this embodied entity with the mind as a sixth. I myself have become this. Forgetfulness of this fact is what we call ignorance. And then ultimately, this experience, not just philosophically, of course, but the sense of oneness is there, which we call samadhi. Now, we can take any one of these approaches theoretically, but our behavior or exhibit, whether we took them practically, it will be a self-evident thing. Other people will notice. There are various evidences, physical evidence even of this, this degree of revelation, this degree of oneness. But you see, even from a logical point of view, we can understand this oneness. Even from a logical point of view, we can see how modern science is working toward a final conclusion of oneness. But how is it that we feel separate? That's the difficulty. So we have to incorporate seriously all of these other aspects of Maya. The Ramayana is a story. It is a historical account, no doubt, Itihasas, embellished with many stories around it to make it extremely attractive, extremely interesting, and extremely malleable so that it can be presented in a form of a drama, in a form of a poem, in the form of a dance, in the form of a song. We take Tulsi Das, who's taken it in a beautiful, beautiful poetic form and gives these beautiful other aspects and innuendos, beautifully crafted in Hindi. But Valmiki, of course, gives this presentation that includes the last portion, the Uttarakanda. And I remember my own teacher telling me, you see, and he had been brought up with the Ramayana. This Ramayana was his whole life. He had been taught by his aunt and his sister. And whenever they went to the local temple where there were various beautiful artistic renderings of episodes from this great story on the temple walls, a way of teaching people, and every culture will have it. Here in Ireland, where in the older days, when nobody could read, all the churches you'll find, and Celtic crosses in particular, will contain all the pictures of the various stories that had been taught to people verbally and had served as an inspiration for profound teachings. This is the way that people were taught. With this great inspiration, he was a great, great expert on this subject. He writes a wonderful article in the cultural heritage of India, several volumes that took place many years ago. And his particular part in it was to give wonderful, wonderful treatise on this text. He was very adamant to tell me, this Uttarakanda, this last portion, everything, Tulsidas ends, of course, in Ayodhya. Ram and Sita's return and Lakshmana and their return to Ayodhya. But Valmiki's Uttarakanda is inserted. Unfortunately, many commentators say, because this doesn't end on a positive, everyone lived happily ever after, it must be an addition to Valmiki's work. Now, he was a very profound scholar, and he told me, life doesn't end like this. Life ends And some people take any ending as a tragedy. And so all the characters go back to the original dramatic platform, because this story does not begin with the birth of all the brothers. No, it begins in heaven. It begins in the heavenly realm. It begins with a petition. It begins with the necessity for a word becoming flesh and correcting the dharma. And so all the characters go back to their original potential dramatic place, as it were, where the drama begins. That means that this whole life, this whole world is a drama and can be viewed in this way. When we use various kinds of understandings or conceptual understandings for what is this life, inevitably there is this wonderful, wonderful way of looking at it, that it is actually the Lord playing a game on himself. If we take, for example, in this Viveka Shudamani that I mentioned also last week, there is a very beautiful rendering from a beautiful series of condensed understandings in this book. If you go to the 479th to the 519th verse of this Viveka Shudamani, it is made very clear that this is a drama, as it were, on one's own self. I'll bring up the passage. The English translation, which is more useful to you. Anyway, from Sarveshu Bhuteshva Hamiva Samstito Yanatmana Da Bhaharishara San Bhukta Cha Bhukyam Swayameva Savam Vidya Pradak Trutshas Amadataya Pura. I alone, in me, I alone reside as knowledge in all beings, and am their external and internal support. I myself am the experiencer and the experienced. No distinction between the frog and Rama. I am all that was experienced by me separately as this and not this before. So in me, we can view this whole existence as an ocean of infinite bliss. And we can say that the waves of the universe, which is now a physics term, are created and destroyed by the playing of the wind of Maya. Such ideas as gross or subtle are erroneously imagined in me by people through the manifestation of things superimposed, just as the invisible and absolute time and cycles of the period of duration, say, of the universe, into what our rendering is of years, half years, seasons, and so on and so forth. These are all imagined. That which is superimposed by the grossly ignorant fools can never taint the substratum of life. The great rush of waters observed in a mirage never wets the desert tracts. A beautiful rendering, even in English, is a beautiful rendering. And as I say, this 495, I alone reside as knowledge in all beings, being their internal and external support. That is being, support means the substratum. The support of a building is its foundation. And so I myself am the experiencer, and all that is experienced. And whatever I look upon, whatever I looked upon previously, before this understanding, as a this, or as the not self previously, previous to this, before this, a realization, an ultimate realization. So that's how it looked. It was an infinite ocean, actually. That's how I look on it now. Now, how do we get from that position of duality to this position? This is where our spiritual practice comes in. This is where we now have to take this understanding, put it in a corner somewhere, just as if we're climbing a mountain. We understand what the top is going to be like, and we anticipate it. And then we leave it, and we go through the journey. Now, there's no reason, of course, the most direct thing to do is to cultivate this discrimination, this discernment, this viveka, and detach with a new understanding. I don't attach to something that is wavy and ephemeral. So naturally, the detachment will come. That's a direct approach. But should we do that? Most people find it difficult. Understanding that, Shankaracharya himself brings out some alternatives. Keeping that in mind, we then select some different processes. And gradually, systematically, step by step, we advance toward this highest realization. But each person must take stock. Where am I standing now? And therefore, what is my personal answer to any question? Bearing in mind, there's a materialistic answer, which is incomplete. There is an idealistic answer, which too is incomplete. There is an intellectual answer, which too is incomplete. There is a philosophical answer accompanied by an experience derived from our own states of consciousness. That too is incomplete, because all along an experiencer, an observer, a witness has to be there, a knower has to be there. And then ultimately, there is in increasing levels of subtlety and opening up, increasing levels of infinity. Infinity, of course, is used in different senses. Infinity need not necessarily be unlimited. So in increasing levels of reality, not denying the one preceding, accepting it, but accepting that there's a deeper level, deeper level, deeper level, deeper level. And with each deeper level, different answer to your question. So what is a good question? A good question is when I come across a boundary that doesn't give me an answer, then a question arises. Until we come to the next boundary, another question will arise. And all of the Upanishads are all centered around questions. The whole of the Bhagavad Gita is surrounding a practical obstacle, difficulty, and a question arising as a result. And the interesting thing about it is that when we form a conclusion, it's likely to be an incomplete conclusion. Arjun's conclusion was, I should withdraw. But that wasn't exactly the right conclusion that one should come to. It is an answer, but is it the right answer? All right, so far it's only been me talking and no interaction, I beg your pardon. So please, I'm going to pause now so you can all interact a little bit better.
Thank you, Swamiji. It was very nice to listen to the explanation. But I have to lodge some complaint. Last week was VC6 and you have gone to VC 479, 519. In 1 week, you are expecting one book to be finished?
Yes, you see, I don't systematically go through everything. I'm trying, But that's not my nature to systematically
No,
do.
I'm just joking.
Right.
It's always good to have these references to read up later.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No. That's all good. You see, the nearest I get to it is now on Saturdays, where we are now systematically going through the Isha Upanishad. But I may, out of sheer sense of fun, dart here and there also. The most unnatural for me and most disciplined was to go through and I've done it now twice here in Ireland, the Bhagavad Gita. And even then, you see, you have to cross-reference. How you study the Upanishads is wonderful, because in the commentaries, you'll find all kinds of cross-references. And when you go to the cross-references, you find new things coming up. And they, in turn, will have their own cross-references. By the time you know it, you've studied much of the Upanishads through cross-references. And all of them will be answers to profound questions. See, the nature of reality is something that has only arisen in modern science for just barely 100 years, from about 1905 onwards. We've got now the idea that the nature of reality has to be questioned. It becomes a serious question in modern science from 1920s onwards, literally 100 years ago. Because as soon as you investigate the phenomena away from deterministic science, you now have a quandary. The whole of the world as you know it is shaken to literally to its foundations. What is the foundation of existence itself? And remarkably, you come to this conclusion that the world is not what it seems to be. Now, when you come to that conclusion that the world is not what it seems to be, then the next question is, well, what is it? So, for example, some schools of the Buddhist inquiry will only go, the nature of nature itself, the nature of reality is that there is no reality. And that could mistakenly give us a misreading of it to say, they'll put a full stop there, draw a line there. The nature of reality is not assured. And therefore, the whole of what we call existence is a flux. Like a river flowing. But the inquiry doesn't say, what is the observer of the flux? And what is the contrast between something that doesn't change and something that is changing? Should there be a contrast? How will we know something is changing unless as a changeless entity is there? Now, it's not that Buddha didn't go into that inquiry, but since it is of such a transcendent nature, we won't mention it. We'll lead you by the hand, say to the top of a mountain, not giving you the understanding of what is there. Simply telling you, you see, throughout this experience, which we might call our journey, throughout this experience, we will find pain. And we know the cause of the pain. There's a medical examination. What is the cause of the pain? Once we have found out the cause, we know how to deal with it. But we're still not telling you, we're still withholding from you this final conclusion. And the non-dualistic philosophers will do the same thing. So Shankaracharya will go along the line of every kind of avenue of philosophy you can think of in a practical sense. Please continue doing your worship of God. Please continue doing your duty. Please continue refining the mind. Please continue discerning as much as you possibly can between what is pain-bearing and non-pain-bearing, what is real, what is unreal, etc. And detachment can occur either by cultivating it or in a natural way. When you attach to God, you'll detach from the world automatically. You won't have to systematically attempt to do it. It's just a natural process. Accepting all these things contained even in the Bhagavad Gita, writing beautiful commentaries on it, and adding to this richness with his own poetry, hymns, and artistic input, moving the heart in beautiful, poetic, creative language. but keeping still the eye on this one without a second. Even so, teaching all of this, at the last moment, pulls the dualistic rug from underneath you. At the last moment, pulls it away. So in the meantime, you see, all the answers will be built up from the dualistic or qualified non-dualistic point of view. At the last moment, pull the rug away. Until you get it. That's it. So for that reason, you see, you can make all these various cross-references. With this understanding, yes, we accept every position until the last moment. And the last moment, we will bring out the final tool. And the final tool will be of a non-dualistic nature. Now, it is a very handy thing to have it all in the back of the mind, because the only final, all-comprehensive answer will come from non-dualism. This is the final tool. In Zimbabwe, we have a phrase, Babijan Spanner. It means, Babijan means a baboon, actually. And I don't know why they call it Babijan Spanner. But a Babijan Spanner is a kind of plumber's wrench, where you turn a tuning mechanism that can open or close vices. That means you can deal with any nut and a bolt of any size. You just adapt the tool that you have. So what is this non-dualistic philosophy? It is the all-purpose Babijan Spanner. It deals with every inquiry, actually. But that answer may not be satisfactory for many people. But it's not meant for other people. It's meant for you. So we are really fortunate that we have this wide range of tools that we can use. And when appropriate, we can bring out the non-dualistic tool, even though for the majority of our life, we'll be dualistic practitioners. But that's fine. All right, we finish off then by invoking peace 3 times in 3 circumstances. That is, any protection from peace that is disturbed by our own misunderstanding, and disturbance of peace caused by any others, and finally, any peace that is disturbed by simply what insurance calls act of God. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.